Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. Please enter your questions for the presenters in the questions panel of your GoToWebinar control window, and at the end of the presentation, we will get to them in the order received. This webinar and the slides will be available on our website shortly after we finish. Now, I'll pass it over to our presenters, Floyd Smith, Director of Content Marketing at NGINX, and Nick Shadrin, Senior Product Manager at NGINX.
Welcome to our webinar, Unit at Scale, Use Cases and the Future of Unit. Presenters today are myself, Floyd Smith, and Nick Shadrin, Senior Product Manager at NGINX. And we each have a wide variety of roughly applicable industry experience. The agenda today is to introduce NGINX, which I'll cover, and then hand over to Nick, which will talk about the history of Unit, the features of Unit, and how they relate in an enterprise context specifically. I'll talk a little bit about NGINX Conf 2018 coming up in October, and then we'll take questions. Please enter your questions now so that we'll have them at the end, and your question will be first, and we'll be much more sure to be able to answer it. NGINX open source was released in 2003 and became steadily more and more popular. Really took off, one of the most successful and important open source projects in history. Continued as open source until in 2013, the open source project continued and grew, partly powered and on an ongoing basis funded by the release of NGINX Plus, which is the commercial version. So well more than half of our engineering effort continues to go into the open source product. The company is VC backed by leading investors in enterprise software. We have offices in a number of places worldwide. And I think, yes, we can add Sydney to that list now. We have more than 1,500 commercial customers with various sizes of deployments and more than 200 employees. It was 50 3 years ago when I started, so you can see the growth happening. Now we have an odd adoption profile. So more than 50% of the top 100,000 busiest websites use NGINX. And the busier the website, they're even more likely to use NGINX. So why is that? Because busy websites, the people there are busy. They're running their website. They're reluctant to change unless it's for a really good reason. Well, NGINX is a really good reason to change your stack. NGINX Plus fits in two places, one of which is fairly well understood, but the other of which some people don't know about, so I'll briefly explain it. You'll see that cluster of 4 NGINX Plus servers there. That's the NGINX working as a web server or application gateway. So that's the original development purpose of it, was as a web server that could solve the C10K problem, more than 10,000 connections on a single machine without growing its memory footprint and without dropping connections and causing weird problems. But the other use case that's responsible for a good part of the NGINX adoption is using NGINX as a reverse proxy server in front of your web server. So if you're already using some other web server, you don't necessarily have to change what you're doing, at least not right away. You can drop in NGINX as a reverse proxy, get an instant performance boost because you have taken the internet traffic off your application server or your web server, and you're handling it on a separate machine, and you can configure that machine for security, for control. You can look at your traffic, and then just feed safe traffic into your application servers. Onto that same server, you can handle caching, load balancing. You can take your SSL and terminate it there. There's quite a few things that you can do at the reverse proxy server. We're going to do a web post soon on MTLS, which is mutual TLS, which is both sides authenticating each other, again, at that level. So that's why NGINX and Plus are so popular, because of that powerful ability to kind of save the day when your application servers and web servers are overloaded. You drop in NGINX or Plus and have this great flexible tool that can solve a lot of problems and give you a lot of capabilities. NGINX Plus works in all environments. Because it's software, it's very smooth. So we're very popular download on docker.com, working with containers. We work with the virtual machine people. Work well in public, private, or hybrid cloud, and we have supported solutions in cooperation with AWS and GCP. We're popular on Azure, and of course on bare metal. So basically, once you get your NGINX configuration the way you want it, it's largely portable from one environment to another, and really just takes the worry out of a lot of things. You don't have to redo a lot to move your environment around. Of course, containers are a big part of that. And then I'm going to describe the unit-related resources on NGINX.com. We'll also have the how-to resources at the end of the webinar that Nick will share with you. So this is reading and learning. NGINX Unit is part of the, oh, and I'm sorry, you're going to get this slide. When you get the slide deck tomorrow, you're going to get this slide and be able to click on these links. You can't right now, of course, but when you get the slide deck, they'll be there for you to click on. So NGINX Unit plays a role, an important role in the NGINX application platform going forward. So we describe that. We describe Unit as a product. We have an intro with NGINX originator Igor Sisoyev and Nick. I'm going to add the link to that before we send it out. I missed it. We have a demo on YouTube, which is very popular. People really enjoy this initial demo of Unit from our conference last year. Then quite a few NGINX Unit blog posts and an introductory webinar. This is more a specialized focus webinar where we have a little more experience with Unit under our belts, and other people do too. There's some comments which are interesting on some of these, which are worth reading. Almost all safe for work. And I'm going to make an odd recommendation that I usually make and surprises people, but even if your questions are technical or deployment related questions, our sales department can be super helpful, because if there's actually a sensible use case where you might consider becoming a customer, we will get our systems engineers involved in helping you understand and decide where and how to use Unit and other NGINX offerings. And it's super helpful. Our SEs are extremely popular internally and externally. They go around and give talks. They fly all over the place helping customers. And so our sales team is a low-key, easy to access gateway to those kinds of resources. And it's a very good thing to do when you get serious. I'm going to turn it over to Nick now to actually talk about what we've found so far with Unit.
Thank you, Floyd. On the point of talking to our sales team, I want to mention one thing. So even if they don't answer the question directly, they at least equip everybody with the resources and the next steps on how to find the answer to the question yourself. So let's talk about the history of the NGINX Unit project first, and then dive deeper into the features, use cases, and various points of the Unit functionality. So why did we build this project? Well, we believe that we know quite a bit about the front-end connectivity to the web servers. The HTTP layer and the variety of different traffic patterns that are common to the millions of NGINX websites gave us a lot of knowledge on the peculiarities of this kind of traffic pattern. We know how to work with connections from the slow clients. We know how to work with different kinds of encryption inside of different platforms in the containerized fashion, virtualized and bare metal things. And we know how to optimize things for various latency and throughput challenges. But the thing is, when we looked deeper into the other side of the NGINX connectivity, into the application servers and deeper into the backend, we found that some of the challenges and some of the feature sets on that side of the world, they're quite a bit different. And that difference, it happened to be even more pronounced when we saw the rise of the more dynamic, more distributed and microservices environments. We see that when your infrastructure is dynamic by design, when you have a bunch of virtual machines, cloud workloads, and so on across the environment, we see that the backend connectivity and the backend operation must become also more dynamic. We found another interesting concept that is currently getting a lot of traction. It's something that people call sidecars, as they put a a set of different agent and proxy in software next to the actual application workload. So going into this list of challenges, we've founded that new project, NGINX Unit, to help resolve them. The main functionality and the main ideas behind the unit project is to build the server that is dynamic by design. And it means that any kind of changes that you are performing to the server software, they are done in memory, and there is no concept of a restart or reload of the server software. In addition to that, we provided the API access to those changes. So API itself, it's just an interface to perform a change one way or another. So that's why I usually distinguish those two features into the different buckets. One is being absolutely dynamic, as making changes immediately in memory. And the other one is a very easy interface to understand, which is the API interface. Next, we looked at the different stacks that our users have. And the application stacks, they tend to be different across the various organizations. Most of the companies around us use more than one application language, and thus they have to use and maintain more than one application stack. Reasons for that can be anything, including the better use of some application libraries, the history of the organizations and the merges between the different companies, or sometimes even just fashion. So what we found with Unit is that we could create a server, and we created that where you can use not only the different languages altogether, but also different versions of the same language. One of the good examples of using the multiple versions of the language is when you take a well-known PHP application and migrated it from PHP 5 to PHP 7. Mostly it works when you have a really complicated set of functionality and really extensive application. A good test and a good evaluation with the new version of the language is also required for a production project. It's even more fun if you want to upgrade something from Python 2 to Python 3. Next feature that I want to talk about is related to the security between the different applications. Even though you run various apps within the same server, you still can use different users and groups to separate the applications one outside of one from another. And we will be adding more security functionality as the features of Linux C groups and such in order to get the resource isolation even better between the applications. And one of the great things about Unit, which comes out of the API access to the configuration and the use of multiple application versions and the versions of the languages, is the consistency between your application operation. Let me demonstrate the example of such consistency in 3 different apps. What we did here, and this is a direct example from the Unit API. What we did here is we took a PHP, Python, and a Ruby app. We set up pretty similar settings for all of those. And what you can see is with Unit, you can have all of that configuration defined in a similar way. Now, if you look closely, PHP, Python, and Ruby, they are not exactly the same languages, and they don't have exactly the same settings. So some of the differences in the configuration, they do exist. You can see those differences in the bottom. But the style in how you define them is still exactly the same. The most recent changes to the Unit software are as follows. Well, you can look at the full list of changes, of the new features and bug fixes at the changelog at the bottom of this page. However, the main ones, it's the Perl and Ruby support, in addition to the first 3 original languages that we designed. Then it's the customization of the application. It's very important to have different apps taken the various parameters not only from their own configuration files or their own settings of different sort, but also define those settings dynamically through the environment variables. And for PHP, we designed the PHP ini functionality, where you can define all of those PHP-related settings directly for each application. In addition to that, we added HTTP settings for some of the very important timeouts, functionality across the post body sizes, added HTTP 1.1 keep alives, and other features. All of those changes there, they will be augmented even further. And for example, one of the main things that we are currently designing, and this is something that's going to be available very soon, it's the support for TLS encryption when you access the application. TLS encryption will be available in the same dynamic fashion, and the configuration changes will be available dynamically, just as any other setting and any other parameter of the unit configuration. You will be able to upload the certificates and change the certificates without touching the files, just doing that directly through an API. Let me talk a little bit more about the unit functionality for the enterprise usage. We spoke to a number of our users and various commercial customers of NGINX Plus, and the various organizations, they often tell us a lot about their infrastructure. And one of the things that enterprises of different kind want is the support for Java language. Currently, our team is working on the Java implementation for Unit. It is in the research and development phase right now. And we had some early successful tests with the very minimal implementations of the apps, and currently working on extending that to the form where an enterprise will be able to take their Java applications and use it with Unit together with other kinds of applications that you might have. One of the main drivers for Unit in the enterprise is the consolidation of various kinds of servers. And it's not necessarily the hardware servers of different kind. This is also related to the server software. When you don't have to manage a multitude of application servers and consolidate that usage into one application server, it becomes significantly easier for the infrastructure. Now, when you are moving things around more frequently, you have the option of the dynamic control. And all of that comes without impairing the security of the applications. So improving all of those things and having the control of the various applications is what can easily bring Unit into the enterprises of different kind. A good example of the use of Unit in the environment is the ease of automation. Instead of making a change to the configuration file and then creating the reload workflow or employing a different kind of configuration management systems, what you can do is you can ask Unit to perform a change directly to the environment. And all of that easily integrates with any tool that can make an API request. The next thing I want to talk about is the use case of consistency between the various operations of Unit, and having that same configuration API and same software in all kinds of deployments is really simplifying the use of the application servers and the use of different applications in the environment. And the third item I want to talk about is flexibility. You can use Unit the same way as NGINX, in a bare metal way inside of a container, or in a virtual machine in a cloud or in your own network. It's basically up to you on how you deploy that. There are official containers available for Docker, both for NGINX and for Unit, and you can use them just with, starting with a very simple line from NGINX or from NGINX/Unit in your Docker file. So that configuration is really easy. And if you wish to use something in a very customized fashion, if you have your own deeply custom applications running in the patched versions of various languages, you can take the source of a unit and compile it with your own changes or for your own languages the way you like it. Since it's the open source software, you're free to do that at any scale that you like. We see some of the early projects and the implementations of Unit, and they mostly relate to the newer applications in the environment. So the newer applications in the environment is when you have the pilot projects of different kind, when you have the newer developments there, and usually what we see is the customers who are using that with a small variety of languages, usually just a couple of languages from the list that we support. Still, we see that a lot of the applications on the internet they are done in PHP, and that is probably the primary language that we see in our usage today. The next thing is that we see as some of the feedback from our early users is the easier updates with just 100% uptime for the applications. And another interesting case is the test of various versions of the app or various versions of the app in a different language while using everything in that same server. All of those things, they integrate nicely into the DevOps workflow. However, it does require you to learn the bits and pieces of our APIs. Now let me pass it back to Floyd, who will tell you how you can learn more about Unit in a face-to-face fashion.
Yes. So one of the most popular resources that we've had was the presentation at NGINX Conf last year, introducing Unit. So the attendance, of course, of our conference was very high, and people accessing that after the fact has been off the charts. If you look at the YouTube video, for instance, of the demo. So this year at conference, we're going to be showing everything that we've talked about now, and you'll get hands-on with Unit. You'll get to talk to people who are actually using it. You'll get to hear about the latest updates, some of which were tipped a bit today, and then more beyond that. You'll also hear, for instance, at conference last year, we talked about the fact that NGINX Controller, the management product, will be supporting NGINX Unit in the future, and you can start to get some details on that. Now that we're shipping a number of different products and projects, how they work together is an important issue. We're also going to have some, that's kind of the top level, how things work together and how you can plan your projects. We're also going to have some really interesting specific presentations on some really deep technical issues on different aspects of our products, and we'll be talking about the we'll be describing the specific presentations and who will be presenting them in the near future, so keep your eyes open for conference. Here are the details for registering, attending. I'm going to talk about training in a minute too. So NGINX Conference 2018, October 8th through 11th, that's 4 days, but I'll unpack that a bit. It's in Atlanta, which is a great place to go for a conference. It's also surprisingly easy to access from all over the world. It's a major hub, right? So you go through Atlanta to get to a lot of places. So if you want to go to Atlanta, it's a very easy thing to do. Chicago is the other major US hub, but Chicago often has weather problems. Atlanta rarely has weather problems that affect flights, so it's great for that purpose. You can register now, but I want to talk about when you go to register, you're going to see quite a few options, but they're very popular options. See, October 8th is a Monday, and then you got 9th and 10th, Tuesday and Wednesday, and 11th is the Thursday. Well, the 8th and 11th are each training days. So the NGINX modules training, which sold out really fast last year, NGINX modules training sold out, and then everyone who registered after that, often like one person in a group at least, would say, of course, I'm going to attend the modules training, right? And we had to tell them it was full. This year, we're offering the modules training twice. So 2 of our sharpest core NGINX developers present this training. They've refined it from last year, and there are 2 chances to go. I do think those sessions will fill up. So the same session is repeated on the Monday and the Thursday. Along with the repeated modules training, on the Monday, we have a couple of NGINX training courses which are more on the basic side. And then on the Thursday, we have several NGINX training courses that are more on the advanced side. So those bookend the 2 days of the actual conference. And what we're seeing is a lot of people signing up either for training in 2 days of the conference or for both days of training, as well as the conference in the middle. So you can work really hard on Monday, take it a little bit easier, although some of our sessions won't give you much of a break on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then dive in again, roll up your sleeves and get into it on the Thursday and really increase your expertise in a notable way. So we've really listened to what we've heard over the years and come up with a really popular offering. All right, so I will ask you to please post any questions, and I'm going to start diving into some questions now.
Mm-hmm. Let me add about the conference that we will have several different sessions on Unit, as some of them will be more use case and demo driven, and some will be more deeper dive into the configuration and the recent changes in the software. In addition to that, you will be able to talk to the engineers of the software directly and to the other users who are trying out the new kinds of software and deploying that in the various kinds of environments. So that's definitely a very practical event to go to. Yeah. So as far as other resources on Unit other than the conference, let me walk you through a couple of things here that are really useful for the newer adopters of the software. So first of all, the unit.nginx.org website. That one includes a lot of documentation on how to install, how to configure and use it. And this is basically the main hub on the information about the project. The second one with github.com/nginx/unit is a very good social network for the developers and the reporters of various questions around the software or even bugs. So if you want to talk to us, one of the good things is to open the GitHub issues page for the project to see what's already been reported and see the current state of the code, current state of the project, and the activity around that. So if you post your use cases or your information on that, you can do that there. Or if you prefer the more old school method, you can sign up to one of our mailing lists and ask your questions there. And the third resource is the blog portion of the NGINX.com website. Even though you might say that NGINX.com is all about your NGINX Plus commercial solutions and you want to sell me something, even though some of that is true, at NGINX.com we post a lot of technical information and a lot of updates on many of our open source projects. And most of the updates on the newer versions of NGINX Unit, the current state of the roadmap, and the blogs on the use cases of the software is something that you can find right there in the blog section of the website. So for the technical users, I definitely recommend to go to that URL and see the various posts that we prepared for you. Now I will pass it back to Floyd to answer some of our first questions.
Yes. So one question that we've got here that I can tackle is, have we gotten any enterprise-specific feedback about Unit? We actually have a customer advisory board that we meet with every year, and they come out here and we talk to them for a couple of days. So we give them an update and they give us their feedback. So in talking to them, they said that Unit is really interesting to them because they have to limit the number of languages they support within their enterprise to 1 or 2, because they only want to support 1 or 2 different sets of tools for supporting different languages. With Unit, they're going to have a lot more flexibility and capability to work with different forms of languages. So they can spread that out and they can allow people to experiment. They say that there's a real creative there's a real creative bottleneck with their limited language support. There may be a language that they want to start using now to bring it in the future, and they can't start doing that because their resources are too limited. With Unit, they'll be able to do that much more smoothly. So they're really looking forward to it for that. The other feedback, of course, that we get from them is that while they have people doing Unit work in-house now, they're really looking forward to Java support. That's actually, not only is it a popular language for them, but it's also their bigger pain point around language support. I will also mention that our Java support is going to be framework by framework. That's how we'll increase our Java support over time. And they really like that idea. It made perfect sense to them. And several of them expressed a willingness to consider migrating to a different Java framework if it was one that is more modern than what they're using now and is one that they're confident in Unit supporting going forward. So that's some of the enterprise feedback that we've gotten.
Yeah, thank you, Floyd. I can see a question about the Go language support for Unit. Well, the Go language, the Golang is supported. And what's interesting that it is supported in a bit of a different way compared to PHP, Python, Perl, or Ruby. When you are building a Go application, your actual executable is usually the application server itself. So what you do, you tend to create a lot of networking logic within that application and start listening on HTTP ports directly by that application itself. So the way we are supporting that is instead of using the HTTP package for Go, you can use the Unit packages. And when the Go application is launched by the Unit server, Unit will, instead of opening the HTTP port, the executable will start talking to Unit using the shared memory pools. What it gives you is the separation of the networking stack directly into Unit, and it separates the configuration of HTTP from the application. That way you get the consistent operation of your Go application, the same way as the other kinds of applications in the environment. And that also gives you the zero downtime upgrades, different changes, API access to the settings of the application directly. This functionality is really unique, and you can see how the operation of the Go apps works in the introduction of Unit that was done at NGINX conference last year. That's the video with Igor Sisoyev and myself for the Unit intro.
Yes, exactly. And I actually worked for a startup that eventually failed, but we had a great slogan. Our slogan was, "We only do what only we can do." And I think that the extension that you disable, the functionality you disable in Go working to use it under Unit is actually a case of Go doing something that not only they can do, right? They're trying to handle some problems for users, but Unit basically replaces that non-core functionality.
Another great question that I see there was related to the SSL support for Unit. I briefly mentioned that during the webinar that we're working on the SSL TLS support. The way it's going to be done is you will be uploading the certificates and the key, the private key, directly as the request body directly to the Unit server itself. You won't have to change the certificate file on the file system in order for Unit to pick it up, or you won't have to tell it to reload for that same reason. You will be able to use the API directly to make the certificate change. Next, you will be able to apply those certificates to the listeners of Unit designed to connect to the specific applications. When is that going to be happening? Well, we had the first initial in-code tests and some successful internal evaluation of that functionality. So it's really close to the production use. I would expect that to be available within the next couple of months or along that time frame. So it's really close to being available for you.
And that ties into our user conference being in October, which is a couple of months away. Also on SSL support, one of the questions that always comes up right along with SSL support is around performance, because people are rightly concerned that SSL is going to slow them down. In the introductory Unit webinar, we talked a little bit about some of the things that should make Unit pretty high performance and also give it a quite reasonable memory footprint. And that's compared to NGINX, which is famous for its small memory footprint. But I think that, again, conference time will be a good time to ask some of those questions live and in person. Also, you can do your own testing. There's starting to be a couple of comments online where people have done some informal Unit testing and made some favorable comments, but it's still early days, both for Unit and for any organized testing.
Yes, thank you. So then the next question I can see is related to the Node.js support. Currently, we are researching the work on Node.js functionality. The general idea is that when you are creating the Node.js apps, it's very similar to Go when you are creating an application server within your code directly. So we will be working along those lines to have that supported. However, I don't have a direct timeline for you to tell you when Node.js will be supported, but as I'm saying, it's in research today. I have several different questions related to the peculiarities of the Java support, and what I can say with the bulk of those questions is Java is a very extensive world of different kinds of software. Yeah, I can see various enterprises using different frameworks, different servers, different kinds of deployment models with Java, and we are researching various things along that nature. And the moment we will be able to share a direct timeline or the results of that research and code, we will be doing that, and make sure we will make a lot of noise about Java support so you won't miss it.
Yeah, yes, very good. I'm going to take and answer a question about NGINX because there's some overlap in the functionality of the two. It's just, how does NGINX support layer 7 load balancing? I'm just going to say that NGINX does support layer 7 load balancing. That's what it's really good for. If you go to use it on AWS, for instance, the model is instructive. They use their network load balancer for layer 4 support, and then they tell you how to set it up to work very well with NGINX doing layer 7 support. NGINX Plus has some specific load balancing features that are exclusive to that commercial version. Let's see, I was going to say something else. Oh, yes, if you have a hardware load balancer, a hardware ADC as they're called, then you'll find similarly, you can keep the hardware ADC and use it for layer 4 load balancing, combine it with NGINX for layer 7 load balancing. Your application developers get flexibility and easy, quick changes that they control and understand, and they're just in hog heaven, whereas your networking people get to keep managing the network operations people get to keep managing the layer 4 load balancing, which is more important to them.
Before I answer the last question on Unit, let me tell you on how to get more information on how to get your other questions answered about NGINX, Unit, and any other of our solutions. When you receive any email from us, you will never see "do not reply" there. You will quite the opposite see "please reply" or "please send us a message," and we'll help you and do our best to answer it. So whenever you receive any kind of communication from us, you can just hit reply and respond to that address with the questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to either equip you with the resources helping you with those questions or answer those questions directly. So now the last question about Unit that we got in this webinar is about the static content. Well, yes, we all know that internet mostly consists of different cat pictures. Yeah, and static content is the vast majority of traffic on the internet. So we have several ideas on how to have the static content supported within the unit environment and have it as a dynamic server for static content. So we did put that functionality into the roadmap and into the feature requirements list for the software. Once we have this absolutely available for you and know the timeline when it's going to be available, we'll share that information. However, it is possible to create static content for unit and make it a static server. So technically speaking, that's a very good question. Thank you for the person asking that.
And there's a deep technical consideration that I can add here, which is that animated GIFs of cats are considered static content in an NGINX context. So we're not ignoring the 20% or so of the web that's animated GIFs of cats, as opposed to the 80% that is still images of cats.
I absolutely agree.
Scalability experience of customers that have used NGINX Unit or reverse proxy. So for the reverse proxy, that actually is not a unit capability at the moment. It is an NGINX and NGINX Plus capability. And the scalability experience of people using NGINX as a reverse proxy is awesome. Major CDNs are based on NGINX and or Plus, and those are global, literally global scale. Netflix uses our stuff, and that's probably the most intense app out there today. It's moving something, we hear numbers like a quarter of all internet traffic and so on are going through Netflix. So yeah, that's a good use case for NGINX software. Scalability experience for Unit, I would just say it's early days. So there isn't big production deployments yet that we can speak to, and that's something we can address the underpinnings of that at conference.
Well, we didn't build anything into Unit that would hinder its scalability, so it should be pretty fast for you.
Yes.
And another thing to add here, and that actually goes really well with another question that popped up here on my screen, and that's related to the high availability of functionality. So the thing is, within Unit, you can create multiple different apps at the same time. And when you create new applications, it's a good idea to test them without running any production traffic through the new apps before you run all of the tests. So what you can do, you can create a new app using that same server, run some traffic through that, and then replace the applications with zero downtime. So having two of the different kind of applications or several different workers is what's available within Unit itself. As far as running multiple units and having high availability over the failure of the whole server, Unit acts as the same kind of Unix-style software as the other kind of servers around you. And you can apply any of the high availability features of keep alive D and similar solutions, or put an NGINX load balancer in front of that and see the functionality of high availability handled by the downstream load balancer servers. So yeah, there are many solutions available, and it's possible to see how it works together within a specific environment, but many solutions are available.
I also will, I'll finish up by mentioning a business concern that relates to technical use of Unit. This right now, these next couple months are really a great time to get hands-on with Unit and start using it because it's a quieter time than it's going to be, as I'll explain. Right now, you can get questions answered, you can offer input, and there's a really good chance of getting heard on on your use case and your specific requests, and getting what other people are doing. Once the team starts working on Java and starts making that available, we're just going to have a whole bunch of questions about why my version of Java isn't supported, or what features of this specific version of Java are and aren't supported. So it's something, of course, NGINX already works in a wide variety of very technical environments. We're good at this stuff, but it's going to keep us busy. And it's going to be kind of a big rabbit hole of stuff that we have to work with around that. So if you want to take the time, if you want to become sharp on Unit, taking the time now to do that, and either, of course, we recommend coming to our conference, which is very easy for us to do, but whether you can actually attend or not, or just communicate with us in other ways, this is a great time to do it. The announcements at conference are going to keep the team quite busy with follow-up for quite a while to follow, and while they are superhuman, but even Superman has to take a break every now and then. So this is that makes this a very good time to roll up your sleeves, get your hands on, get some experience with it, knowing that if you need that Java support, it'll be coming, and you can see how it works and configure it and so on now before that support comes, and then you'll know what you need to know as it gets more widely used and more widely applicable. And I think that finishes us up for today. We will be sending out the slides and a copy of this presentation, and we look forward to encountering you guys in various ways and at our conference coming up.
Yeah. Thank you.